equipped with Gengar as a teammate to ensure the spikes remained. Other teams liked Mirror Coat on a Deoxys speed lead, which could completely turn the tables on special attacking leads like Kyogre and Latios. Being able to take out a Pokemon and still get its spikes up was excellent. Overall, Deoxys speed's niche was specific but excellent, and as such, the Deoxys forms as a whole were amongst the most defining pieces of the Gen 3 Ubers metagame. The bad news, spoiler alert, after Generation 4, Deoxys Normal would never be seen in Ubers again. The good news in Generation 4 Ubers, it had a small but genuinely good role by virtue of its extra bulk over Deoxys Attack. It was not actually bulky by any stretch of the imagination, but just like Deoxys Speed where it used its just good enough bulk to carve out a niche for itself in Gen 3 Ubers, so too did Deoxys Normal in Generation 4. Deoxys Normal's niche was based upon the following premise. Deoxys Speed was the lead in Gen 4 Ubers. Everything revolved around it. Mirror matches between two Deoxys Speed were quite messy. Deoxys Attack was an excellent lead in its own right, but it had the flaw of losing to the standard Deoxys Speed set, which would easily 2-hit KO Deoxys Attack with Extreme Speed. This is where Deoxys Normal came in. With some defense investment, it could do what Deoxys Attack couldn't and survive these two Extreme Speeds, allowing it to take Deoxys Speed out with Shadow Ball and its own Extreme Speed, ensuring that Deoxys Speed would never get more than one layer of entry hazard. Deoxys Normal was far better at this role than a specialized form of Deoxys Speed because of its significantly higher attacking stats. Deoxys Speed's Shadow Ball was far too weak to even come close to putting bulky variants of opposing Deoxys Speed in Extreme Speed range. Deoxys Normal was still highly useful in non-Deoxys Speed lead matchups because it could set up Stealth Rock and Spikes, setting the stage for its offensively minded teammates, just like Deoxys Speed. Essentially, Deoxys Normal played like a Deoxys Speed that had an advantage against other Deoxys Speed. Being able to beat Deoxys Speed was enough to give nearly anything a niche in the Gen 4 Ubers lead metagame. Ariados was a testament to that, but being able to beat Deoxys Speed while also effectively being Deoxys Speed, now that was effective as it was unique. Deoxys Normal was no gimmick. It saw significant tournament usage and success, and was a legitimate part of the Gen 4 Ubers lead metagame. Deoxys Attack was also a major part of the Generation 4 lead metagame. Diamond and Pearl's addition of Focus Sash ensured that despite Deoxys Attack's frailty, it would always survive one hit from full health, which was a huge boon for it, giving it 2 turns with which it could wreak havoc on the opponent. Whereas its speed counterpart dedicated itself to laying hazards, Deoxys Attack bludgeoned the opponent from turn 1. Grass Knot, Guillotine, Groudon, and Kyogre, Superpower Slam Dialga and Darkrai, Shadow Ball shattered Deoxys Speed, especially non-Sash variants, and even Sash Deoxys Speed couldn't both KO Deoxys Attack with 2 Extreme Speeds and get a hazard up. Plus, eventually Deoxys Speed started dropping Extreme Speed altogether. Shadow Ball also shellacked Mew and Giratina Origin. Extreme Speed topped everything off beautifully, providing potentially crucial chip damage against the many Choice Scarfers tasked with revenge killing it. Deoxys Attack's sheer power was completed perfectly by its many coverage options, making it even more dangerous. For example, Deoxys Attack variants couldn't touch Fortress, but all it took was the addition of Fire Punch for the Deoxys Attack user to completely turn that matchup on its head, as well as catch cocky Scizor trying to pursue or U-turn. It was a similar story with the growingly popular Tentacruel lead, who started running Lumberry for Darkrai, only to get obliterated by Deoxys Attack's Psycho Boost, a move which also let it beat Rayquaza leads and was also massively threatening to Groudon and Kyogre. Spikes weren't Deoxys Attack's main focus, but it could sometimes incorporate them into its moveset to great effect. When facing an opponent that would run away from Deoxys Attack, as many Pokemon did, Deoxys Attack could throw down Spikes and accomplish something for its team no matter what switched in. It allowed itself to somewhat bypass its occasional 4 move slot syndrome this way. Plus, it was still plenty threatening with just 3 moves, especially since they were highly customizable depending on its team. It could go with Stealth Rock as its hazard of choice, but only did so rarely. Spikes were more of a bonus when using Deoxys Attack, as you could afford to go without them if the situation called for it to attack the opponent instead, thus rendering it unable to set them up. You didn't want to have this situation with your Stealth Rocker. As a common threat, players of course attempted to prepare for Deoxys Attack, but the nature of Uber Pokemon tends to be that they have the versatility to make this an immensely difficult task, or their strength will just overwhelm you anyway. Deoxys Attack perfectly exemplified this concept, and reliably started off the slugfest for its fellow residents of Louisville, teammates. Deoxys Attack was more than just a lead though. Though rarer, it also had a place on highly offensive teams as a mid-game attacker. Hazards would be up, so a Focus Sash would be rendered useless, but Deoxys Attack didn't even mind, because it could just use another amazing 4th generation item seemingly tailor-made for it, Life Orb, whose recoil hardly mattered since Deoxys Attack was KO'd by everything anyway, and whose power boost was absolutely stunning. Life Orb Deoxys attack played similarly to Mewtwo, with some key differences. Mewtwo packed self-destruct and was capable of surviving the strong priority commonplace in Ubers, Giratina O's Shadow Sneak, Scizor's Bullet Punch, and Lucario and Rayquaza's Extreme Speed, even if it wasn't in perfect health, such as after it had taken Stealth Rock and Life Orb recoil. However, Deoxys attack was far from outclassed. It had its own distinct advantages. The most notable was the stark difference in power between the two psychic types. Deoxys attack was so strong that it made Mewtwo's astonishing base 147 special attack look like nothing in comparison. While they could barely tank Mewtwo from high health, Groudon, Giratina Origin, and the Latios twins were absolutely wiped out by Deoxys attack's Ice Beams, while Kyogre was absolutely thrashed by Thunder. DOA also had the benefit of significantly higher speed. In fact, it was so fast that it often ran a special attacking boosting nature, further highlighting the difference in power between the two. It could afford to do this because it wouldn't really miss out on much, as it still outpaced the next fastest thing, Mewtwo, whereas Mewtwo was forced to run a speed boosting nature, or it would be outrun by Darkrai and Shaman Sky. However, speed boosting Deoxys attacks still had to be respected. In fact, it was a significant reason why Scarf, Kyogre, and Dialga ran speed boosting natures as opposed to special attack boosting natures they would otherwise prefer. DOA's huge attack was another major wall breaking benefit. Its powerful superpower powered through Dialga and Heatran far more effectively than Mewtwo's Aura Sphere, and ensured it destroyed Blissey without setting up, while Life Orb Extreme Speed ensured that Scarf, Palkia, and Kyogre could only check it while at high health. It was even easier to bring DOA onto the field despite its frailty, now thanks to the addition of U-Turn. As such, teammates like Scizor and Jirachi allowed DOA to reliably circumvent its biggest weakness. Overall, Deoxys attack was an absolute terror in Generation 4 Ubers. Deoxys defense was not completely unviable in Gen 4 Ubers, but it was rarely seen because it was quite difficult to utilize effectively. Its neutrality to common moves that had worked well in advance did not translate well to Generation 4, which had Choice Specs and Life Orb around every corner, and thus required resistances to the moves with enormous base power coming off enormous attacking stats being boosted even further. Even Blissey couldn't always get by on sheer neutral bulk anymore. The metagame simply moved at too fast a pace for DOD. Knockoff could be annoying as always, but its impact was largely diminished in the kill every turn environment of Gen 4 Ubers. Even DOD's access to spikes wasn't enough. It lacked the dragon resistance that made Skarmory and Fortress so effective. Deoxys defense couldn't even take on a role as a stall breaker with Taunt and Recover, as that was outclassed by Mewtwo, who had gained Will-O-Wisp in Generation 4, and whose vastly higher speed made it far better as a popular offensive item. Deoxys defense was never consistently comfortable at switching in and actually exerting some sort of offensive pressure on the opponent like in Gen 3. Its lack of resistances in this power crept metagame meant it was always on the back foot, which is the most exploitable thing ever for good players using offensive teams. DOD definitely had potential and some players explored the interesting possibilities it brought, but it never had any sort of genuine impact on the tier. And it's hard to do that when you have to recover as soon as you switch into an attack lest you die immediately, and that just gives a free turn to Choice Band Scizor. Now before we get to how Deoxys speed completely defined Generation 4 Ubers, we must first explore its adventures in OU. Yes, in Diamond and Pearl, Deoxys speed was OU for some time, incidentally alongside another defining Pokemon that would eventually join it in the tier above, Garchomp. While Deoxys speed's offensive capabilities were unimpressive at best in Ubers, its power was just fine by OU standards, considering it had incredible super effective coverage and could power itself up through items. It quickly became one of OU's most defining offensive threats, and many top players thought it completely invalidated offensive teams. It was so fast, it outran the vast majority of choice scarfers. You would have to revenge kill Deoxys speed on an offensive team, since you certainly wouldn't be walling it, meaning it probably got a KO before you even had a chance to force it out. And to make matters worse, revenge killing opponents were severely limited. For choice scarfers, you were limited to Infernape, Gengar, and Azel, who were as rare in OU play as that list of options was short. Priority moves would get the job done after Stealth Rocks and a few rounds of Life Orb recoil or a superpowered defense route, but this was unreliable. Also, this was pre-platinum, meaning no Bullet Punch Scizor yet. Many offensive teams wound up relying on winning a speed tie with their own Deoxys speed. Some players began using Expert Belt as the item on Deoxys speed, making it even more difficult to deal with by removing Life Orb switch stalling from the equation, meaning it stayed out of priority range even more easily, while still providing the crucial boost to its many super effective attacks. Though it was this offensive set that completely shaped the metagame, DOS was also an incredible lead. It was impossible impossible to stop its Stealth Rock early game, unless you got lucky and managed to taunt it by winning a speed tie with your own DOS. After getting up rocks, DOS would support its team even further with nigh unstoppable spikes or dual screens, making the offensive monsters on its team like Swords Dance, Garchomp, Lucario, and Infernape even more ludicrously dangerous. No matter what it did, DOS was completely overwhelming, warping the metagame around it. As such, it was banned from OU before Platinum's release. Deoxys Speed's lead Stealth Rock Spike set was one of Generation 4 Uber's most defining aspects since day one. Perhaps the most defining outright. Its influence could be argued to shape the tier more than Kyogre's Rain and Choice Specs boosted Water Spout, or all the Draco Meteors in the world. There was nothing more terrifying than giving DOS rocks and Alera spikes, than having to switch into several of Uber's most absurdly dangerous Pokemon. The offensive pressure and momentum these Pokemon supported by immediate multiple hazards, whether through sheer power or Darkrai's Dark Void, was enough in and of itself to make rapid spinning a difficult task. But then Platinum came around and added Giratina Origin, making spinning nearly impossible. The old adage went like this: the leads in Gen 4 Ubers are Deoxys Speed and leads that beat Deoxys Speed. Alternatively, if your lead allowed Deoxys Speed to get up uncontested rocks and spikes uncontested in the first 2 turns, it was a bad lead. Same concept. Of course, part of what made DOS so great is its versatility. It had a ton of options to mess with the opponent, and by constantly adapting and continuously succeeding even when everyone prepared for it. Leads with a priority move such as Rayquaza and Giratina Origin were popular as they would bypass DOS's speed and limit it to 1 layer of hazards. This was effective, especially since these leads were difficult to switch into safely, and they could blast switch-ins thinking they could absorb a priority move. For example, Dialga could come into Extreme Speed or Shadow Sneak, but it wouldn't enjoy taking a Draco Meteor. However, this type of prediction went both ways, and these attacking leads often felt pressured to use their priority move on the second turn, lest they give DOS a second layer of hazard and thus not even do what they were supposed to do. As a result, DOS often successfully switched out on the second turn, with the switch in taking minimal damage. Thus, DOS was able to maintain early momentum while preserving itself for crucial death fodder later, or
come into my fiery heart.
I'm all alone with my microphone. Here we go, it's on.
itself for crucial death fodder later, or potentially even a layer